Hello, Isa. You asked me about bleeding the brakes on your 220S, and I'm going to show you how we do it here in the shop. You'll see the camera being moved around and maybe a little jerky at times because I'm having to make this video by myself, but I'm going to give you an idea of how we do it, and we've been very successful. All right, things that you're going to need: a jar to capture your brake fluid in as it comes out of the car, a plastic hose, a 1/4-inch PVC hose that you can get from the hardware store, works great, 9mm and 11mm wrench. Now then, let's discuss the reasons you will be bleeding the brakes. You have broken into the system to replace wheel cylinders, or in this case a master cylinder. And you notice on the master cylinder there's a bleed screw that comes on the master cylinder already. I don't know why they did that. It's absolutely useless. You do not bleed the master cylinder at this point, so don't worry about that. Now then, the reason for the exchange of the brake fluid, or to bleed the system, is of course replacing parts, refreshing the brake fluid, because it does absorb moisture, and that moisture will get in the system and start rusting things. So if you don't drive your car very often and get that water either cooked out of the brake fluid or moved around, then you're going to start getting rust spots in the low parts of your brake system, and that's very detrimental to your brake system. So I always tell people, get your cars out regularly, drive them hard, use the brakes aggressively to heat everything up and make sure everything's working properly. The scenario I paint to people is you're coming off the highway at warp speed. You come off the highway and all of a sudden a school bus full of orphans, crippled orphan children, pulls out in front of you. And every one of those orphan children is being mentored by a personal injury attorney, and you have to stomp on the brakes incredibly hard in order to stop, so you don't hit the bus full of crippled children and have those lawyers come after you. So make sure your brakes work by using them aggressively, which also helps keep them working properly. Most of the cars that come in the shop are for having sat too long and the brakes don't work anymore. So do not be afraid to use your brakes. And you will not use up the brakes by going out and actually using them, because people drive these cars so infrequently. It's about impossible for you to use up the brakes. In fact, I've never had a car come in here where someone says the brakes have been I've used up the brakes completely, they need to be refreshed. That's never the case. The brakes are always stuck or just rusted. So let's say you have a mushy brake pedal. If you are pushing on the brake pedal and the brake pedal slowly sinks down below from underneath your foot, that's your master cylinder is not working. If you're pushing on the brakes and the pedal is real hard, your brake booster is not working. If you push on the brakes and it sinks and then you push on it again, or pump it a couple of times on the brake pedal, that can be the master cylinder, or it also could be the friction discs that are on the self-adjusting brake shoes. And I believe I've got a drum off here, and I can show you that real quick. Alright, right here underneath here are friction discs that keep the brake shoe in position for normal braking, but as the lining wears, it allows the shoe to move out and maintain proper shoe to drum contact. And if these friction discs are not holding the drum in position, then the shoe will retract. And so if these friction discs are not holding the shoe in position, the shoe will retract, and then as you push on the brakes, the shoe has to expand out, and it'll feel at your foot as if your brake pedal is going to the floor, and then as soon as the shoe contacts the drum, you'll have a firm pedal again. So that's another thing that you have to diagnose in terms of the brake system. But if we have a normal rebuilt brake system, or just the exchange of fluid going on, this is the procedure for bleeding your brakes. Alright, first you're going to get a jar in which to capture your fluid, some kind of container. This just happens to be the one I use. It's convenient. And you are going to remove the cap on the bleed screw on the top of the booster. Put your wrench on here. Put your hose right here. And put the hose down in the capture jar. And of course you're going to top off your brake reservoir. We use .3, which is what these cars are designed for. I know a lot of people like silicone, and I've used silicone and had it be fabulous, and I've had it not work at all. So if you want to use silicone, it's up to you. All you can do is try and see if your system will accept it. So the process is, you got topped off your reservoir here. You're going to open the bleed screw, and what you want to do is push on the master cylinder to force fluid through the system and to purge it of air. This normally should be done with 2 people. So you're here. What you'll do is you'll open the bleed screw. You'll tell the person in the driver's seat to push on the brake pedal. Have them push on it slowly and steadily, and then they will say down. And then what you do is you close off the bleed screw. And actually, what I do is I tell them down. I open the bleed screw, I say down, and I know when they've pushed down, I close off the bleed screw and I say up. And you repeat that process, watching your fluid level here, and wait until you have no more bubbles coming out of your hose. And we are finished bleeding. We have started the process, and this is the first step. Bleed the brake booster first, because what you're trying to do is get all your air bubbles from the master cylinder up through the system and out. And so this one's the first one you bleed. We then go to the furthest point from the car, from the brake booster and the reservoir and the master cylinder. The furthest point is going to be the right rear. So we come back here. We're going to start in the right rear. Let me go get my light. I'm using a 190 SL as an example, but basically this applies to just about every car that I think you'll ever run into. And the 220, the 190 SL, they're all the same underneath. So you're going to get underneath here, and okay, get out of here. Okay. All right. So now get the camera adjusted. Okay. So you see what's going on. Okay. Now then, every wheel cylinder and every caliper has got a bleed screw. So I'm going to zoom in. Thought I was. There we go. This doesn't work very well with gloves. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to remove the rubber cap on here. Put your 11mm wrench on here. I forgot to mention the bleed screw on the booster is a 9mm. And then you're going to put your hose here. Let's before we do that, let's make sure you got enough swing on your wrench, because if you have it's easier to do with the wheels off, but you don't have to have the wheels off. But you do have to have the car up in the air. That makes it so much easier. So what you want to do is position the wrench to where you've got some swing where you can move it. So, all right, we got the wrench in position, got our hose going into our capture jar, and you'll open up the bleed screw and you'll tell your person pushing down, and then you'll see some fluid or bubbles come out, and you close off the bleed screw and you say up, and then you open the bleed screw and say down, close off the bleed screw and say up, and you will keep doing this until you get solid brake fluid out of here. No bubbles, just solid brake fluid. And of course, monitor your fluid in the reservoir, and that's what it's easier for the person doing the pushing to do that for you. Now then, you will next go to the left rear and there's that bleed screw right there. Remember, the bleed screws are always at the top because you're trying to get the air out of the system, and so that's why the bleed screw is at the top. So you're going to go to the left rear, and then you're going to go to the right front. I'll go up there and see what that one looks like. Put my cap back on the bleed screw here. I forgot to do that. Okay. Sorry about the cinematography here, but that's what happens when you work by yourself sometimes. Okay. My coworker Steve is just now approaching. So now we're at the front. Here's what it looks like at the front. What did I do? Get on the wrong side? Yep, got on the wrong side. It's on the back. Okay. Once again, here's our bleed. Let's see. What can we see in here? Let's get this in position. We can see something. Okay, here's our bleed screw. Again, pull the cap off. Put your wrench on there. Make sure you can get a good swing on it. Put your hose on here and start the process of, all of a sudden you're going to turn this and go down, up, down, up, down, up. And again, monitor your bleed screw, your brake fluid level. And then you will go to the left front. Good morning, Steve. I'm making a video on how to bleed the brakes for a fellow in San Francisco and anybody else that's interested. Exciting. Yep. Anyway, so we did the right front. The last one to do is the left front. Same way as we did before on the others. And then we're going to come back, and the last screw to bleed is the top of the brake booster. So do it first and do it last. And then you're going to the right rear, right front, left front. And as always, monitor your brake fluid level so you don't induce any air into the system that isn't already supposed to be there. And I think that's bleeding the brake system. I went over mushy brakes. I went over friction discs not holding their position. Brake hoses. Flexible rubber brake hoses over time will swell internally and will choke off the fluid to the wheel cylinders. And on this car, we've updated it with the stainless steel brake hoses. The originals are rubber and they clog up internally, and so sometimes you will have a sticking brake and you're not quite sure what's causing it, and it could be the inside of the brake hose is swollen. What else can we mention on brakes that I didn't mention? Anything that you can think of?
To replace a master cylinder or anything like that, need to make sure they get the free play right between the pedal and the pin.
I forgot that. Thank you. Okay. This is an adjustment on the master cylinder, and it goes to the pin that you push on with the brake pedal, and this clearance right here between the pin, the push rod, and the master cylinder is 1 millimeter. And if you don't have that clearance correctly, the internals in the master cylinder will not open and close properly, and fluid will not get where it's supposed to, and it won't work. It's probably a tough way to explain it, but that's close enough. What will happen is you won't be able to close and uncover the orifice in here to allow brake fluid to drain back into and refill the master cylinder. How's that, better?
Sounds good.
All right. Let's see, on the brake booster, sometimes most of them have a little teeny weep hole down here that you can barely see. You can't see it actually, but if you see a little seepage of brake fluid coming out down there, that's your first indication that you've got a seepage on the brake booster and it's going to fail. Holes on this one, the holes on this side. What else? Anything else you can think of before I turn off this 16-minute diatribe? Okay. All right. Good luck. I didn't cover pressure bleeding. I cover this where two people do it. You can pressure bleed some of these. It depends on the quality of the can right here, and if you're going to get a good seal with your pressure bleeder. I've never done a vacuum bleed, so I can't comment on that. The pressure bleed doesn't take very much pressure, just like 3, 4, 5 psi to push fluid out. Not a lot. And that can, and if you do that, you can do a one-man bleeding. You pressurize here, and then you go to your wheel cylinder and open it up, and as the pressure forces the fluid out of the reservoir, it forces it out the bleed screw, and you can watch until you don't have any more bubbles coming out and lock off your bleed screw. Of course, the only problem with that is if you're not careful, you can completely empty your reservoir of fluid and have to start the process over again. So, all right, that's probably enough for the time being. If you have any questions, ask. Thank you.